So Larry, what would be a particular result that you're proud of that to this day you're still kind of amazed that you were able to do it?
There was a drowning up in a lake. It was up north. And what happened was a family rented a boat and they were out in the lake, and then the boat stalled. And when they had one of the people on the boat, before it stalled, they jumped into the lake and thought, I'm going to cool off. It's a hot day. And all of a sudden, the current started coming up more and more and more. And the poor guy who had jumped into the lake just to cool off, he's paddling, and it gets the current stronger, and the wind comes up, and the boat drifts away. And so they the other people on the boat tried to start the boat, and it wouldn't start, so that they could go back and save the person that's now struggling and drowning. And ultimately, he drowned. So it was called what we call a wrongful death case. And at first, and we brought a case against the boat rental company, and the boat rental company said, they rented the boat, they signed a waiver, whatever it is, and zero. And we ultimately got 7 figures on the case for the family, a well-deserving family. And you helped me on that case too, Rob.
Because a boat has to be in good working order. You're not going to waive away your right to a fundamentally safe boat, even if you rent it. So I think that was the whole key there, was that we could prove that this boat, they knew it had been stalling, and they rented it out anyway.
Yeah.
And there's this poor guy drowning, and the family is just drifting away in this boat. Instead of being able to start it up and go and rescue him, they're just getting further and further apart, and then this poor guy just couldn't do it. And that's such a gut-wrenching story, that one.
Yeah, one of the turning points was, real quick, was that an employee, admittedly, when I took his deposition, sworn testimony, he said, we were having a lot of problems with that boat, and it would stall. And so it wasn't like the company didn't know about it.
And there was something about how it would appear to be in neutral, where you could start it, but it wasn't in neutral. It was in some other gear.
Well, normally neutral would be at this level, up and down, like this degree. But you had to go this way to put it in neutral, which made it even more complicated to get the boat started to help this poor guy as he's drowning. What a terrible situation.
So that one, that was able to be turned around.
Yeah, from 0 to 7 figures.
Yeah.
How about you, Rob? What case in particular?
Well, still my very favorite case that we were able to turn around this was a medical malpractice case.
Which are tough cases, by the way.
Really tough case. It involved an immigrant, came to this country as an older man, brought his whole family here, political asylum from El Salvador. The whole family was being hunted down, and so they got safe haven here in the U.S. But as a boy, he had been injured, and it messed up his arm. He couldn't really use his arm. And as he got older and older and older, the arm started to become very painful. And so there's this new procedure at a big institution that he wants to try to just get out of pain. He's not trying to get the use of his arm back. He just wants to get out of pain. So they do this, not really experimental, but it's a new procedure, and they mess it up. Instead of cauterizing a blood vessel that was little bleed that you take a little cauterizing iron and stop the bleeding with, he accidentally cauterizes a nerve, a major nerve.
And what's the result of that?
He became paralyzed.
Right.
Yeah. Actually, let me think about that. I'm sorry. It was a blood vessel, but it was a blood vessel feeding the spinal cord. That's what it was. And so he cauterizes this blood vessel. It was done completely on accident. but it took out a good portion of this guy's spinal cord. And of course, you can't walk without a spinal cord. You can't feel your legs.
Right.
And the more compelling part of the story, not just because they had come here years before fleeing political violence in their country, but after this old gentleman gets paralyzed like this, he had a son and a daughter who are in their 30s-ish, maybe early 40s. And so one of them says, okay, I'm going to get a job where I work at night and I'll take care of dad in the daytime. And then the other one says, okay, I'll get a job where I work in the day and I'll take care of dad at night. And that's what they were doing. And it was this story, this fantastic story of a family's bond.
And dedication to one another.
And just willing to do whatever it took to take care of their loved one and make sure he had the basic comforts in life, and they weren't depending on some outcome in the case. They were doing what they were doing.
But they offered you $0 at first, didn't they?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, even though there was a letter from the doctor to the family that said, I'm sorry, I accidentally cauterized this blood vessel feeding the spinal cord. He had that letter and they still said it wasn't his fault. And they tried to say it was a stroke during the surgery, that he just, had this stroke. And so, but it was a good win, and they were a good family, and people saw that, and that was very satisfying for me.
Yeah, you went the extra mile. You went all the way through.
Of course, that wasn't a settlement, though. That was a trial.
That was a trial.
Yeah.
Yeah.